have until the beginning of the designated date. Sometimes it may be the next class, sometimes it may be a weekend. It'll give you the time frame in which it's due.
Okay,
But
and then the quiz is tonight, or that starts on
no,
Wednesday?
no quiz tonight, obviously, because we haven't learned
Okay.
anything yet.
Yeah, no, okay. All right. I was just
I
confused.
learned some of your guys' interests and hobbies, but that's about it. So we're not going to quiz you on that.
Okay.
Okay. So, please, if there's any questions or confusion, please email me, reach out to me at any time so we can cover that. Okay. So that's your homework, your weekly quiz. You're going to hate me for this, but as part of this and every other EMT and first responder course, this is a mandatory, federally mandated courses that you have to take 3 of them from FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration. Introduction to Hazardous Materials, Incident Command, National Incident. These are self-guided, self-learning courses where you have to demonstrate completion at the end of the course. They are brutally boring. I kid you not. You don't have to submit them until the end of the semester. You have the whole semester to do them, but they have to be done. If they are not, all 3 of them not submitted, we cannot let you take the certification exam. So after the end of each course, you will print up a certificate of completion. It's very important that you email that copy of completion to Daniel Armstrong so we can file it and put it away and have it registered for you. Please, and yes. Question?
Hi, my name is Waleed.
Hi, Waleed.
I just wanted to make sure if you can email that to us so I don't forget.
Email what to you?
The information you just gave for the FEMA.
Well, it's on your Blackboard site. You know, announcements will be made periodically if you haven't submitted them yet, but it's kind of up to you not to forget. So, I mean, that's why we're covering this now. So just make sure. Jazeera?
Hi, I wanted to ask about the book, the EMT book. So I procrastinated in getting it, and now I know that, or now I'm seeing that if I order it now, I won't be getting it until a couple weeks.
Shame on
So
you.
I want to know if we'll be using it immediately so I can still order
Immediate.
it online, or should I just buy it online?
Immediately. I believe they make an electronic version that if you purchase.
Yeah, I
you
wanted
get,
to avoid doing that. That's why, because I feel like I learn better with a hard copy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. It's old school with me. I don't know what your excuse is, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you need this book yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So
So then
I
I
mean,
guess I'm getting the ebook.
I mean, we do try to. All right, so let me be brutally honest. Waleed, just don't let me know that because that violates copyright laws, and I didn't see a thing. so, so here's the deal. I mean, if you're academically very strong, if you have experience in college, then you might probably be able to get away with notes, the PowerPoints, and the presentations that we present. We're trying. We're in the process. It's a long process of trying to make this a textbookless program because I know more than anybody. You know, textbook publishers are probably the closest thing to organized crime, legal organized crime, that there is. That and the pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, Ethan, I pretty much agree with you. I mean, they just got you by the you-know-what. And the problem with medical textbooks, such as EMT, all right, that's fine, Jazeera. Yeah, and the problem with EMT books and any type of medical reference book is the minute that it comes off the presses, it's already outdated. That's how fast this stuff changes. So we're trying to put together something that's a little more flexible, a little more fluid, but at the same time, especially now because we're not meeting in person, it's important to have every resource available to you. So I would definitely recommend getting that book sooner than later. Okay, now I just kind of lost myself here. Can I take the FEMA courses now? Why would you want to? God, why would you put yourself through that? Yes, it can be complete. It can be completed anytime between now and the end of the course. Pace yourself though. See how well you're doing, because this course is intense. I will kid you not. I don't want to scare anybody. I don't think it's particularly hard, but it is intense. There's a lot of material that's going to be thrown at you in a very short amount of time. You know, we've packed on about a good 40 extra hours of material over the last 5 years to stay in line with the national standards, and sometimes still not enough. It's intense. I mean, if you have a 9.5 college credit course, you better believe it's going to be intense. We don't teach to the minimum national or the minimum state standards. We go above and beyond what you need to know as far as minimal standards, because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is you might be the one on that ambulance treating my wife or my kids or my mom and dad who are elderly. You better damn well think that we're going to ride you through the ringer to make sure you're the best that you can be and nothing less. That's why I think our program is one of the best out there, because we push you beyond the limits and we go above and beyond what's just required. So in any event, where was I here? I think I lost my place. Okay, so we talked about, of course, the daily lessons, the weekly quiz, the FEMA courses, and of course, at the end of your daily lessons, as I mentioned before, there's a mandatory discussion questions that you need to engage in. You need to show well thought out, critical responses, not just something like, yeah, I agree. We'll talk a little bit more about the requirements for that later on. So, any question about the structure of this Blackboard course so far? And those we're really talking about is how to navigate through the menu. We'll talk about more things about requirements in a moment. Have I lost anybody yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right, good, Marilyn. Thank you. All right, so let me X out of this. HA, you know my philosophy is saying so far so good. Don't ever say so far so good. And my reason for that is if I push you off a 20-story building and you fall down, I can say hi to you at each window and say, how you doing? And you can tell me so far so good. 19th floor, so far so good. 15th floor, so far so good. 10th floor, but you know what the ultimate outcome is going to be. So never jinx yourself by saying so far so good. That's just my personal philosophy. Where are we here? Share files. Okay, let's move on with our policies and procedures presentation. And for this, I'm going to record. You're welcome to it, Anthony. And also, what as long as I don't forget, because I am older and I do forget things from time to time, I will usually put up recordings of our sessions. It takes about 24 hours, but it'll be put in your daily lessons. So in lesson number 1, this session is being recorded. It will be downloaded into a YouTube video and put up for you guys to review over and over again, ad nauseum. All right, so let's go on to our emergency medical technician presentation. Welcome aboard, everybody. Okay, so this is just the layout of your staff. Bottom information is a little bit wrong. Daniel Armstrong, EMT, CIC, stands for Certified Instructor Coordinator. He's got a PhD in physical therapy. He is your sponsor administrator. He's ultimately in charge of the program. He deals with a lot of the paperwork, the administrative stuff. Stephen Whitlock, that's me, EMTP, paramedic. Well, actually, I let my paramedic expire, so I'm back to EMT basic at this point. I'll get my paramedic later on when things blow over. I'm a CIC Certified Instructor Coordinator also. I have a Master's of Science in Public Health Administration and Education, and I'm also a licensed and certified physician assistant. Certified. And I'll be your academic and clinical coordinator, although I don't know if we're going to be doing clinicals this semester. Hopefully things will quiet down and we'll have a chance to do that. You won't meet him for some time, but on Saturdays, you'll also be working with Mr. Kevin Rummel, EMT paramedic extraordinaire, certified instructor coordinator, Master of Science in Critical Care RN. He will be your skills coordinator. He will be in charge of or your hands-on activity on Saturdays. And then you'll also be working with various assistant lab instructors. So, you know, if you've ever taken a chemistry lab or biology lab on campus, you know, you have a main instructor and then sometimes you have lab assistants that help you through. We kind of have the same thing going on at Queensborough. We have certified and some not certified, but very capable instructor assistants that will help coach you through your skills. Very important to understand that there is a hierarchy of authority. So when you're in your skills group working with your lab instructor, you're expected to follow the instructions of that lab instructor and follow all the said rules and regulations of the program. If there is an issue with the lab instructor, a disagreement, a conflict of personality, we'd expect that as adult students in an adult learning institution that you can try to work it out with that instructor on your own. Now, no instructor is out to get you. We have our instructors have very high regard for our students, and we really just want the best for you. But if that's the case, then if there's a conflict, if there's a problem, if there's a disagreement, or if there's a misunderstanding, then that needs to be brought to the attention of your instructor coordinator for the session. On Saturdays, that will be Kevin Rummel. If there is no resolution to the conflict, then you can bring it to myself, or then ultimately to Daniel Armstrong. And Daniel Armstrong really, he's the judge, jury, and executioner of any problems going on in the EMT program. Well, not that we don't foresee any problems, because we usually don't. Okay, please disregard the bottom here. Class times are Monday and Wednesday from 6 to 10. This was accidentally for the summer program, and Saturdays from 9 to 6. I always love this little saying from the the book The Art of War by Lao Tzu: the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So when you're entering a program like this, and believe me, I have been there. I've been there through EMT program, paramedic program, going back to college for prerequisites, PA program. You always start day one thinking, oh my God, I got this long road ahead of me. Am I ever going to get through it? Well, how are you going to get through it? One day at a time, and by taking that single step. Before you know it, more steps are left behind you than in front of you, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will get through it. Hopefully you will get through it with the aid and the assistance of all your peers in the class. And again, that's you know, that's an unfortunate thing about having this this pandemic situation and this online platform, is I think a big strength of the program is students' ability to engage with each other and support each other and work with each other, and hopefully that's not lost upon this online venue. So just some various pictures of EMTs in action in crowds and in public institutions, and some happy situations as well. I mean, you name it, I've probably been there over the last 30 years, and give yourself enough time, you probably will as well. So the question is, are you ready? Now, if we were in classroom, I'd be doing a little coach cheering chant and saying, are you ready? But honestly, that kind of loses its efficacy here on an online venue. So just repeat to yourselves, I am ready, and I'm sure you are. So let's go over some of the policies and procedures and some of the dry administrative stuff. Attendance policy. Well, again, we will offer a little bit of flexibility as far as this goes with the circumstances, but normally students may not be absent for more than 2 sessions. Now, what is a session? A session is any one evening from 6 to 10, or any 2 Saturday sessions, either morning 9 to 1. Usually Saturdays go from 9 to 1, then lunch from 1 to 2, then session number 2 from 2 to 6. So Saturday is 2 sessions, one morning, one afternoon. Absence from more than 2 sessions may result in dismissal from the EMT program. So we take attendance very, very seriously. Again, are we going to try to be flexible for extenuating circumstances? Of course we are. But at the same time, if you miss a certain amount of sessions, you may be required to make up that material, either through an assignment or a project or something else to be determined at a later time. So we just talked about that. Again, how much does this really translate into an online platform? Not much, although when it comes to Saturday sessions, we take punctuality very seriously. Persistent latenesses will not be tolerated, so especially on Saturdays. All class sessions will begin promptly at the starting time indicated on your schedule. So as far as Saturdays go, you're expected to be in the classroom, in the seats at 9 o'clock sharp. If you're 9:05, 9:10 is not 9 o'clock. And think about why we're trying to impose this philosophy of punctuality. When you're talking about EMS, emergency response, EMS is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week endeavor. Okay, the ambulances don't stop running just because you're running late. If you're working, say, 9 to 5, and the previous shift is working the overnight, and your previous partner is expecting to get off at 9, and you're 15 minutes late, I'll get to that, Brianna, and you're 15 minutes late, accidents happen, we know that. But if it's a persistent pattern of that happening, people are going to be annoyed at you. People are not going to want to work with you. People may want to take it out on you or your automobile. And think about this as well. If you're supposed to be at your shift at 9 o'clock and you don't show up till 9:15, most places, the overnight person doesn't get to go home. They can't keep the ambulances idle. They have to be out there responding. So usually when a person's relief doesn't come in, that person stays. Now, say you're 15 minutes late. You don't think like 15 minutes is a big deal. But if at 9:10, that ambulance gets called for a job, now that's another hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours that they don't get off on time. It happens, but people tend to not appreciate it if it happens too much. You'll be required to sign an attendance book when you come in person. If your name is not, or your initials are not in that book, doesn't matter if the instructor sees you face to face or face to mask or mask to mask or whatever, you're basically considered not there. So it's your responsibility and obligation to make sure your name is in that book. And as far as attendance goes, of course, situations happen. The dog barfs over your clothes, the baby is colicky, the car doesn't start. There's always a reason or excuse that can cause you to be a class late or job late. Understand that. But remember, Saturday is 2 sessions, 9 to 1, and then 2 to 6. Sometimes a little bit sooner. You're expected to be back in class at 2 o'clock or whenever the instructor coordinator, usually Kevin Rummel, says so. If you're already on campus and if you're already on the premises, there's absolutely no excuse, no reason to be late for that second session. If you're late for that second session, you can't blame it on the alarm clock, you can't blame it on the family, you can't blame it on the traffic. It's carelessness and apathy, which shows us the kind of attitude that you have going into this profession. So just keep that in mind. We take that very seriously. All right, so we talked about that. As far as class cancellation goes, I don't think hopefully that won't be an issue. You never know. But if class has a potential to be canceled, the best thing to do is to go on the website, the QCC CUNY website, to find out if class is canceled or not. Please do not email or try to contact myself or any instructors to ask if class is going to be in session, because chances are we just won't see it in time. The rule of thumb is, though, that regardless of the weather circumstances, if the college is open, then class is in session. If the college is closed, barring the online stuff, because obviously the college is closed for in-person. I don't even know if the college is doing in-person things yet, but either event, the college is closed for in-person events tonight, but the online session is still in play. And that may be the future of this program to begin with, to going forward. Maybe going more and more hybrid versus brick and mortar learning. It remains to be seen. Depends on how successful we are. All right, so the question is on everybody's mind, what's expected of you? How are you evaluated academically? Well, you have multiple exams, you have multiple quizzes, you have multiple homework assignments, you have participation in discussion questions, and you have skills performance. And each one of these criteria you get a grade for. So you have a total of 8 major exams, including your BLS/CPR exam. Couple that with multiple homework assignments that we talked about previously. The average of your homework assignments will equal another exam grade. So will the quizzes, so will the discussion questions, so will your skills. So let's just go over how this works. So your final grade is the sum average of your BLS, exam 1, 2, 3, your midterm, exam 6, final exam. Your homework average makes another exam grade. Your quiz average makes another exam grade. The discussion questions altogether makes another exam grade, and your skills average makes another grade. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 criteria by which you're being graded on. So let's take a look at this for a moment. So let's see how all this works out mathematically. So you take your BLS exam, which is traditionally the first exam you take in this course, but that's going to be put off to later on in the semester. And you did real great. You got 100 on this exam. You rocked it. You're the man or the woman. Then your first exam, you got a 94 on. You're really off to a great start. Then you got a little cocky and lazy. In exam 2, you got a 60 on. Well, passing on your exams, on most exams, is 75. Passing on your BLS exam is 84. All right, so let's move on from there. Exam 3, you got your act together. You got an 84 on. Exam 4, you really seem to be moving it. You got a 92 on. So what happened on exam 5? You got a 78. Okay. So we'll go, exam 6, 68. That's 2 failures, 2 strikes. We have somewhat of what we call a 3 strike and you're out system here. So yeah, the bottom line is you fail more than 2 examinations, not quizzes, not homeworks, but full-blown examinations. Failure of more than 2 examinations will render you disqualified from the EMT certification exam. You could still take the class, you could still take the credits, but you will not be able to be certified as an EMT. You'll have to take the course over again. And hopefully that's not the case. We'll discuss that later. All right, but lo and behold, you just squeaked by with a 75 on the final exam, so you passed that part of the program. So now you submitted all your homeworks, and the sum average of all your homeworks is about a 96. You got kind of sloppy on the quizzes, though. Your quiz average was a 68. Now, that doesn't count as a strike 3 against you because it's only quizzes, but it will bring down your overall average. And at the end of the day, you have to maintain a persistent academic average of 75 or above in order to qualify for the state exam. Now, your discussion question average is about an 80, so you've been doing good with that. Skills you did pretty good on. So overall, your final average was an 89.41, which would translate academically, I think, to what, a B+. You know, if I'm feeling generous, I might round it off to an A-. We'll see about that. So, yep, HA, if you're already certified in BLS, that's fine, but it's part of the state requirement that you still need to complete as part of the EMT class. And I just missed the last question. I'm sorry, I'm not sure you said that already, but is passing grade for an exam? Passing grade for all exams except BLS is 75. Passing for the BLS exam is 84. And passing on quizzes and everything else is 75 as well. So what type of learner are you? You ever stop to think about that? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you the type of person that learns just by being lectured to? Some people are. I never was. I was always more of a visual learner. You know, I wish I had the multimedia outlets that we have today. When I was a student in school, I think I would have fared much better. Because that's just the way I learn. I like to see diagrams. I like to see pictures. I like to kind of see things. Some people, they can learn just by having a whole conversation. And some people are, you ever heard about, street smart versus book smart? Some people are kinesthetic learners. Some people don't really get the concept of what they're being taught until they can apply it in practical motion. And that's one of the reasons why you have laboratory sessions in chemistry and biology and physics and science. That's why you have writing workshops. That's why you have language labs to kind of give a practical application of things. No different in EMT class as well. So let's talk about some test-taking skills that you need to be aware of, and how this EMT class may be a little different than everything you've taken in the past. I don't know everybody's background, but to teach you to be an emergency medical technician and to teach you to be a medical clinician, because when you think about it, requires more than me just throwing some information at you, letting you memorize it, and then you throwing it back at me on a multiple choice exam. I mean, unfortunately, multiple choice exams are by and large the biggest way we have to evaluate you just because of the numbers involved. It's not like the old days of the Shaolin Kung Fu master working one-on-one with the Kung Fu student. We just don't have that type of resource. So you got to understand what we're putting in as far as giving you exam questions. All right, so for example, this is a level 1, very basic question. What is the definition of ecchymosis? Now, of course, I'm not expecting people to know that right now, unless you do, that's great. But the definition of ecchymosis, there's just one straightforward answer. You either know it or you don't. And the definition of ecchymosis is a bruise. That's just a medical term for a bruise. Sounds big and fancy, but that's all it is. Now, to tell you God's honest truth, if I put 50 questions on exam like that, does that show me that you know how to be an EMT? Does that show me that you have absorbed and are able to integrate and evaluate the information given to you? No, that just tells me that you have a good memory, which is great. But you know what? This is stuff that can be referenced on a cheat sheet anytime. So I need to know that when you're out there, you're able to put 2 and 2 together and come up with the answer. Not that there's much math involved in this program, but I need to know that you're able to think critically and solve problems. So here's a level 2 question. What is the proper treatment for epistaxis? So this is twofold here. So here, what do we need to do here? Well, one, we need to know what epistaxis is, correct? I'm sure many people probably have. The question is rhetorical, okay? But yes, so you need to know what epistaxis is. And epistaxis is the medical terminology for a nosebleed. And then you need to know the proper treatment. So you need to know 2 elements to answer this question. And yes, the answer would be to lean the patient forward, have them pinch the nostrils together. Yeah, that's more of a level 2 question. That's more likely what you'll tend to see on some of your quizzes and your homeworks. But to really evaluate your ability to comprehend, to integrate, and work with the knowledge that you're being presented, you're going to get more of us questions like this. Oh boy, those are already a lot of words and it's making some people nauseous. But your patient is a 26-year-old male involved in a side impact automobile collision. He's found standing, alert, but somewhat agitated, cool, pale, and diaphoretic. Okay, so hopefully you know what diaphoretic means. He's complaining of headache, neck pain, nausea, and dizziness. Upon physical exam, you find ecchymosis. Ooh, that word again. Now, if we don't know what ecchymosis is, we're going to have a hard time answering this question. So it's important to build up on the preliminary information to work with the later on subjects. To his right upper quadrant. What the hell do we mean by right upper quadrant? Now, again, I'm not expecting people to answer this right now. I'm just using it to make a point. Which condition do you most likely suspect? So you see what this question is getting at? Not only do I want you to know the answer, but I want you to be able to come up with the answer. So you have to take all these elements and these clues, and you have to put together a mental picture of what's going on with this individual. So he's 26-year-old male. All right, that's great. So we know that a 26-year-old male involved in a motor vehicle collision is going to probably fare better than an 86-year-old male. But that being said, there's still other elements. He's at a side impact auto collision. So what we'll learn later on is that side impact collisions, as opposed to front end or rear end, are dangerous than others because the individual has very little protection, just a sheet of fiberglass and metal. You sound standing, alert, but somewhat agitated, irritated, maybe being a little hostile. That's a sign of something going on. He's cool, he's pale, and diaphoretic means sweaty. So if anybody's ever taken first aid class before, you know what cool, pale, clammy, cold and clammy. That's another word of describing diaphoresis. That could be a harbinger that this person may be going into shock. He's complaining of headache, neck pain, nausea, and dizziness. Okay, so this guy's not doing so well. Your physical exam, which is important as well, which we're going to learn about, you find ecchymosis, bruising to his right upper quadrant, so the upper right area of his abdominal area. And does anybody know what major organ lies there? It's the liver. Which condition do you most likely suspect? So this person is showing signs of shock. This person showing signs that he may have a liver injury, and the liver holds a lot of blood. So if the liver is injured, it may likely spill a lot of blood, in which case this whole scenario is leading you to think that this person is showing a condition called hypovolemia. He's losing blood internally. Now, please, some people may be feeling like they're going into shock looking at this question. You're not expected to know this stuff right now. We're going to build up to it. You need to learn the medical terminology. You need to learn how to do a patient assessment. You need to learn the specific injury processes like head injury, spinal injury, shock, bleeding, things like that. We'll get to that, okay? But you have to understand that this is how you're going to be evaluated. That is not enough just to say the definition of ecchymosis is so-and-so. It's unbelievable that the state, when puts a question like that on its certification exam, 110 questions to evaluate all you've learned about being an EMT, everything that you need to know to basically have somebody's life in your hands and either lose that life or save that life. And one of the questions out of 1 to 10 to evaluate your knowledge of an EMT is, what's the definition of ecchymosis? I find that totally absurd and a waste of time. That's not telling me anything about the effort that any student has put in to learn this material. Okay, so on Saturdays, you're going to have practice and evaluation of various psychomotor hands-on skills. That includes a whole day of CPR and BLS. If you've had it before, great. But it's important now that you not only know it, but you perfect it. There's one skill more than any other that you need to know cold without any reference is CPR. You can wind up doing CPR in any circumstance, at a person's home, in an assisted living center, in a restaurant, and you need to know it because you're not going to have the luxury of having a supervising physician or 12 other medical students lining up to compressions. It's going to be you and your partner. Maybe you'll have some backup, but maybe you won't. So you have to know cold. Patient assessment, medical and trauma, oxygen administration, bleeding control, splinting, AED. We'll get to all of those. Nothing to worry about, really. I know it's overwhelming, but we'll get there. As far as what's required for this course, this is your textbook. It's called Brady's Emergency Care, 13th edition. There is a 14th edition out there. We've made the decision not to go with that just yet. It's very pricey, first of all, and I think it's a little too much information for what's required here. So if you did get the 14th edition, it's not a bad thing, but the chapters aren't going to correlate with what's in the syllabus, so you got to be careful with that. Ultimately, not within the next few days, but by the beginning of September, did I say September? Beginning of maybe March, you're going to need some material. You're going to need a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, and a pen light, as well as a watch with seconds indicator. You do not need a Littman Cardiology $400 stethoscope. We're not listening to bruits and heart sounds or murmurs or anything like that. A simple $12 cheaposcope is good enough for our purposes right now. Please do not spend a lot of money on equipment because this is very rudimentary stuff that we're doing here. Somebody have a question? Okay, guess not. Let's move on. Okay, so this course will be a hybrid blend of internet-based didactic learning and in-person applied skills learning. Students must have internet access to all class sessions. Homework assignments, quizzes, and tests will be facilitated utilizing CUNY Blackboard electronic-based learning system. I think we've already covered that. Um, so now I just want to take a few moments to discuss, yeah, Amazon's fine. You got plenty of time for that. Really, you know, traditionally, they had the equipment at the bookstore on campus where they mark it up about double the price that it's really worth. So I would definitely, if you get a good deal on the internet, now's the time to do it. Students may be dismissed from the EMT program for any of the following reasons, and I hate to have to talk about this because I don't want anybody dismissed from the program, but we do have to follow high standards. Dishonesty, stealing from the college or clinical agency, stealing equipment from clinical rotation, cheating on exams and falsifying signature, any form of a breach of academic integrity is taken very seriously in this program. There's a lot of ethics and values that goes into being an EMT, as corny as it may sound, but the bottom line is you're being invited into other people's houses. You're being invited to put your hands on strangers, on people's children, on their spouses, on their parents. We have to have a level of confidence that you have the type of moral character to be in that situation before we put our names on any affidavit saying that you should be an EMT. Any performance or negligence that causes physical injury to a student, you know, it's one thing to, you know, want to have fun and have a good time during skill sessions. We try to make it fun because we find that helps facilitate learning. But if there's situations of horseplay or harassment for other students or anything like that, there's zero tolerance for that. Any endangerment of life, health, or property in any aspect of the program. Don't do crazy things like, you know, jump out the window or climb up onto the roof of the building. You laugh, but I wouldn't be mentioning if it didn't happen. Being under the influence of alcoholic beverages, drugs which impair judgment, or illegal drugs. Now, of course, I can't monitor what you're doing in your own homes. I would hope that you're not tuning into your laptop or your desktop drunk as a skunk, but can't tell that. But talk about Saturdays. Right? If you come in on a Saturday and you're hungover from the night before, we're going to know about it and we're going to ask you to leave. And that's going to be a strike against you as far as attendance. And we'll just leave it at that for now. There was a situation where we did have to dismiss and press legal charges on a student that came into classroom not only impaired, but with alcohol in their possession. It became a very ugly situation where campus police were called down, the state was contacted, threats were made to one of the instructors, and it was just an ugly situation. Refusing to participate in mandatory skills session will get you, unfortunately, booted from the program. You can't be an EMT unless you do the skills and practice the skills. You can't be a lifeguard unless you get in the pool. You can't be a race car driver unless you get behind the wheel. Distracting or disrespectful behavior during class, lecture, or skills lab session, probably not an issue during online, but again, in class, in lab sessions, we expect your attention to be focused on what the instructor is teaching or what other students are doing. Theoretically, use of cell phones anytime during class or lab sessions. Okay, we'll be realistic. All right. We know that we live in the digital age. We live in the communication age. People have their cell phones. If you feel like you need to be contacted for an emergency, if there's situation going on at home where you have to be on call, please do the right thing. Let the instructor know at the beginning of the session. Keep the phone on vibrate or silent. And if you get that call, please excuse yourself from the program and remove yourself to another area, either down the hallway or into another room, so that you're not disturbing the rest of the class. You know, we ask you that you do the right thing and be respectful of not only your instructor, but of your fellow students as well. Okay, so this kind of got squashed in the translation here, but students may be disqualified, it says, from taking the New York State exam, certification exam for any of the following reasons. All right, so as we mentioned before, failure of any more than 2 examinations. So we have a 3 strikes you're out program. 1 exam failure will result in a written warning. 2 exam failures will result in what's called academic probation. Well, we need to sit down one way or the other and communicate with each other and try to find out where the drawbacks are, what the difficulties are, and try to find up some kind of solution to overcome them. 3rd exam failure, unfortunately, you know, we have to maintain standards. And 3 exam failures means that you're probably not going to get the material right now. Maybe it's just not your time. Maybe it's other life events getting in the way. It doesn't necessarily mean we can't try it over again, but for now, we just have to, chalk up our losses. You can ignore the next criteria, grade of less than 90% on more than 2 take-home exams. That's something we've done in the past, but it doesn't apply because we're all online right now. A persistent academic average of less than 75%. So if you're doing borderline okay on those written exams, but you're missing quizzes and you're missing homework assignments, or you're bombing on discussion questions, and it brings your overall average down below 75, we'll have a couple of interventions. And again, by the end of the semester, if you don't have that academic average up, you're not going to be able to take the written exam. Inability to perform each of the required skills according to the New York State Practical Skills Checklist. We'll talk more about skills requirements later on this semester. We talked about absence of 3 class sessions or persistent latenesses from a session. So 3 latenesses will automatically result in a missed session. So if you're late 3 times, that's 1 missed session. If you miss an additional Saturday after that, that's 3 sessions. That's disqualification from the program. So please watch your attendance and punctuality. Failure to complete the clinical component of the course. Obviously, there's going to be some flexibility as far as that goes. That remains to be seen, how we're going to accomplish that, and we'll figure out one way or the other. Failure to complete and submit the mandatory FEMA online assignments. Again, I kid you not, do not wait until the last minute. You don't do it right now, but don't wait until May 15th. You will torture yourself. And one thing we take very seriously is sorry, Nathan, will there be any, do you mean a written examination in the classroom in person? If that's the case, we're basically trying to avoid that, try to decrease as much crowding in the classroom as possible. So there is a little bit of honor system. Oh yes, there will be physical skills tests. Yes, you'll have a midterm skills evaluation. You'll have your BLS skills evaluation, and then you'll have your final state skills evaluation, which needs to be passed. And we'll talk about the criteria for that a little bit later on, because I think it's maybe too much to overwhelm you with tonight. One big issue that we need to talk about is self-dismissal. Basically on Saturdays, if you are going out to lunch and you decide that you've had enough for the day and don't show up for the second session without telling anybody or letting anybody know, we really don't care what the excuse is. You're gone from the program. Just like if you were at your job and God forbid you had a family emergency, would you just take off from the job without telling a coworker, without telling your supervisor? No, you wouldn't. So we expect the same respect here that we would as if you were on your job. No, basically study groups have always been on your own. What we've done in the past is in-person classes, we distributed on day 1 a list where people could put their phone numbers and email addresses on. We copied the list, handed them out, and we encourage people to get together on their own. Obviously, we can't make that encouragement this semester. So I don't know if you guys can be creative as far as internet platforms, the WhatsApp platforms, Zoom platforms, whatever you can come up with, we'll try to help out and facilitate as well. But at some point, a little imagination is going to be necessary for this semester. All right, so we talked about all that. So let's talk a little bit about the EMT program. Well, some other thing as far as Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you're someone who need special services like additional time for exams, you probably need to contact the college and student services department and need to let me know. We will accommodate you as best as we can. You know, if we need to allot extra time for an exam, that's fine. We can do that. It has to be certified, though. It has to go through the department, and that shouldn't be a problem. If you're someone that needs special services for the state exam, whether it be extra time beyond the 2.5 hours, or somebody to read the exam to you, or somebody, or have it printed in a larger font, you need to contact the state at least 6 weeks in advance of the exam. Please reach out to either myself or Dan for more information if you need those services. That's basically what I just talked about there. Okay. All right. Well, normally this would be the time to do the paperwork in this class, but however, because we don't have paperwork to distribute to you, we can't do that. So if you go back to your menu where it says documents, course documents, I don't have it right here, there is an icon for you to click that will download your certificate, your registration certificate, where you need to put in your name, your address. All the information is pretty much self-explanatory. The course number and the dates of the exam have been filled in for you. It's very important that you download that application for certification, fill it out, and somehow either scan it or email it or get it back to Daniel Armstrong ASAP. He needs it back no later than the 21st, and Dan will talk more about that with you on Wednesday.
Wait, where is it?
If you go onto your course menu, which I can't really access right now, where it says course documents, let me just make sure I have it up there. So you go to course documents, and under course documents, you should see what's called the policies and procedures manual. And yeah, while we're there, you should download that and read that all over as well. And then there's a link that says DOH 65 PDF. That is your application to take the New York State certification exam.
Okay.
So you need to download that, fill it out, and get it back to Danny as quickly as possible. Yes, if you could do that, that would be great. If there's any difficulty in getting it back to Dan Armstrong electronically, please email either myself or him, and we'll try to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about emergency medical services. Where did this field come from? How did it develop? How did it evolve over the years? Before we do that, why don't we take a 10-minute bladder break? So if we need to get a drink of something, I think I need to get something into my voice. If you need to empty your bladders and you don't want to miss any material, this is the time to go. We'll pick up again in 10 minutes, and then we won't be too long after that. Oh, somebody's having a cold one.
That's me. I just wanted to say hi to everyone when they return.
All right. I said we'll start back up at 7:32.
All right, sounds good.
All right, bud. Okay, guys, we're back. Guys hearing me all right? Dan, you
Yeah,
still
I
on
can
board?
hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Daniel Armstrong, who's your administrator, would like to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you to the class. I will see you on Wednesdays at 6:10. I know it's not a traditional EMT class. You know, I do miss seeing you guys in person, and I am very excited to get you in person towards the end of February for lab. I'm going to post contact information. If at any point during the semester you have any questions, comments, concerns, please reach out to me as soon as they occur. If you need explanations on anything, I still have office hours. So reach out to me before something becomes a problem. Steve went over the policies and procedures already. You know about the exams, you know about the passing grades. EMT class piles up very quickly. So you want to get off to a good start. So make sure you study. I know it's not traditional, but form those study groups. Stay on top of everything, because if you fall behind, it's very hard to catch up. It's just like so much that you need to know. Just think of all the reasons a person might call 911. You have to be ready to respond to that, you know, at a moment's notice. So it's a lot of things that we have to remember, and it's very hard to catch up if we fall behind. So please get off to a good start, and if you have any issues at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Any of you guys have any questions for me before I get out of here?
No, thank you so much.
No problem. So fill out those course applications and either scan them and send them to me. Again, I'll
Hey,
list
Dan,
my
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
What do we have to know for the test?
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell them never to ask that.
Never. The goal of this program is not for you to pass your state exam. It's to make EMTs that me and Steve would feel comfortable coming to our houses, taking care of our families. So you will not pass this program if we don't feel you measure up to that standard. So get off to a good start right out of the gate.
Got it.
All right. All right, guys. I will put my contact information up there. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, you too.
I know a lot of you already. We've either spoken through email or face-to-face.
Okay, Dan. All right, I guess he's gone. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of this EMS field. And I always like to start off with the story about my dad growing up in Brooklyn and his mother, his demise. You know, my dad was a teenager in the late 50s, early 60s, and he grew up in Brooklyn, Ridgewood area, the Brooklyn end. And you know, we always assume and take for granted that we have an ambulance almost right outside our door. Anytime there's an emergency, we call 911, and an ambulance comes and takes care of the situation. But that wasn't always the case. Like I said, when my dad was a teenager, he got up one Saturday morning with his brother and my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother, he was like relatively young, in her 50s, early 50s, started complaining of a severe headache during breakfast, and went down to lie down in her bedroom. And I recall my dad telling me the story that they went in to check on her about a half hour later, and she was unresponsive, couldn't wake up, face was twitching and drooling on the side of the bed. There was no 911 system to call back then. I don't even think they had a telephone, actually. My dad was telling me how him and his brother had to run over to the local family physician, tell him what was going on. And only after he had finished up with his patient was he able to come to the house, and physicians never do that anymore anyway, find out what was going on, contact through the use of a neighbor's phone the local hospital to have an ambulance sent over to the apartment. And when all was said and done, there was nothing that could be done. I guess from the way my father described it, my grandmother, his mother, my dad was only 16 at the time, must have suffered a massive stroke, bleeding in her brain that, you know, even if there was a 911 system, probably would have been too late anyway, but it's always a bad outcome. But you think about how times have changed over the years, and how this system has evolved and how it keeps on evolving. The earliest traces of emergency medical services can be traced back to the years of the French and the Napoleonic Wars, and the French armies under Napoleon were really the first organized system of transporting injured soldiers off the battlefield in a very methodical way, whereas a lot of times they were just kind of left to die from their own injuries. A lot of advances were made through the military over the years with the Red Cross, Clara Barton, and especially during World War II. Big advances in pre-hospital medicine have been made. Prior to that, ambulances made their occurrence in the United States in the late 19th century, mostly out of horse-drawn wagons, out of hospital centers. This one, I think, was out of Cincinnati. No, that's not me on there, by the way. And there were no emergency medical technicians on ambulances. They were basically staffed maybe by nurses, surgical residents, and a couple of hurly-burly men in white coats that did a lot of lifting, but didn't offer much medical care. This is outside of Kings County Hospital, circa around 1930, the big bread box ambulance. But like I said, most of the advances in medicine as we know today had its roots back in World War II, when you had Army corpsmen, medically trained individuals who were not physicians, offering medical services to their fallen soldiers. You can see a soldier corpsman right here, administering IV fluids and plasma to a stricken soldier. And at the same time, the military developed more advanced means of extricating and moving mass casualties of wounded soldiers off of battlefields, and in doing so, saving many lives. And then the Korean War saw advances in mobile Army surgical hospital units and helicopter transport, what we call medevacs. In the late 50s and 1960s, NASA developed technology for the space program called telemetry, which was used to monitor astronauts' heart rates and vital signs. And that technology is used today in the field of EMS in the form of telemetry monitors that actually record patients' heart rhythms and get sent to a physician off-site by paramedics so they can proceed on how to treat accordingly. It's called telemetry. So back in the 50s and the 60s, this was your typical ambulance, either a Lincoln or late model Cadillac that was nothing more than a reconverted hearse. And then a lot of times you actually did run out of funeral homes because these are the only kind of automobiles that could accommodate a patient in a recumbent or a lying down position. Now, these vehicles did not have any advanced medical technology on board, and the quote attendants had very little medical training. They were just, like I said, two men in white coats that could drive very fast and pick things up and put them down. Okay, here's another picture of an old vintage ambulance out of hospital system. Kind of looks like a Ghostbusters mobile. To the days of today where things have changed dramatically, where now you have different models of ambulances, some small, some van grade, some big truck ambulances, to what we call fly cars, mobile response units, to medevacs. You have all different modes of response and transportation that were never thought of 50, 60 years ago. So what actually happened to bring about this change or bring about this profession? Well, you figure in about 1965, we're going about 20 years after World War II. The country was in one of its most affluent and economically stable states. A lot more families and people were owning motor vehicles. There was a big push to build transcontinental highways. And so there were a lot more motorists on the road, and there were also a lot more vehicular fatalities and injuries. And as a consequence, the National Institute of Health did studies on the outcome of these victims of trauma and found that the response system to these patients was severely lacking. So this paper was published, Accidental Death and Disability, Neglected Disease of Modern Society, and it really outlined where some improvements could be made as far as response and treatment of major trauma victims. And so what happened in 1966, the National Highway Safety Act was developed and charged the United States Department of Transportation with developing EMS standards state by state. And it allocated funds for infrastructure and highways based on what kind of EMS systems were developed in each state. In 1973, the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians Act was passed, which kind of helped provide uniformity in standards of EMS systems from state to state. Prior to that, what one state would do would be totally different from another state would do. The federal government really had no overview of what was going on. So something that you could do as an EMT in New York could be drastically different than something you could do in Connecticut or New Jersey. It may not be much of a issue right here, but when you're talking about states in the Midwest, when a lot of multiple casualty incidents occurred near the borderlines of multiple states, you had multiple agencies responding to one incident, and one hand not knowing what the other was doing. That brought about a need for some type of national curriculum, a national overview of what EMS systems could do. And I'm sure everybody in this classroom is way too young to remember this TV series, but I remember it somewhat. It was probably one of the first TV shows I ever begged my parents to let me stay up and watch. It was called Emergency. It was on NBC way back, long time ago. And it really gave public attention to what EMS does. It's centered around two LA County firefighter paramedics, two paramedics that worked alongside the fire department, and the plots of most of the shows dealt with medical emergencies that they responded to. And if you ever see it on Netflix, or download or try to beam in a copy if you can. Now, don't take time out from studying to do that, because I can't really advocate that. But some of it's a little quirky and primitive, but some of it still holds true today. And as a matter of fact, these two actors, Kevin Teague and Randolph Mantooth, actually had to receive about a year's worth of paramedic training before actually going onto the show to make it more realistic. And this individual right here, Randolph Mantooth, is still, he doesn't do a lot of acting these days, but he's still very active in the EMS field. He attends conferences, he does expos, and he talks in various venues. So the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration has set forth various standards for all EMS systems, including regulation and policy, laws that are enabled that allow EMS systems to exist, such as Article 30 of the Public Health Law in New York State, resource management, ability to assign and credential people into the EMS systems, human resources and training that we have here at Queensborough, transportation, the ability to develop safe and reliable, hopefully safe and reliable transportation modes, such as vehicular ambulances, helicopters, mobile response units, something called MERS, which are multiple emergency vehicle response units, the big trucks that can facilitate multiple patients, coordination with facilities such as hospitals and receiving centers, communication networks, and standards for communication networks, such as certain types of radios and digital equipment. Public information and education was a big component of most EMS systems. Good EMS systems are not just response systems, they're also educational institutions. And overall medical direction. I mean, every EMT and every EMS service has to be blanketed under the authority of some type of medical individual, usually a physician. And so again, what do EMTs do? EMTs and EMTBs, this is a little outdated, are meant to provide what's called pre-hospital care, not just transportation, but they're basically designed to bring a little component of the emergency room to the scene of the accident or the illness. But you can see in the corner, you have 2 EMTs rendering care to somebody who presumably looks like they're having a heart attack or maybe even cardiac arrest. On the right side, you see EMTs involved in rescue and extrication from a car that rolled over in a cliff. And that's just a few of the things that you'll be responsible for. And components of the emergency medical system include not only pre-hospital care, but emergency departments in and of themselves. And emergency medicine is a relatively young offshoot of medicine as well. Back in the 60s and 70s, most emergency rooms were staffed by part-time surgeons or internists. Emergency medicine itself didn't really become a specialty until the late 70s, early 80s. You'll be interacting with specialty facilities such as trauma centers. You'll learn throughout the course that the nearest hospital is not always the most appropriate hospital to take a patient to. It's somebody who's been shot up by a gun or has multiple injuries from a motor vehicle accident may fare better going to a further hospital that specializes in trauma than just to the nearest local community hospitals. Burn centers are very important to learn about because burn injuries can be horrific. Pediatric centers are coming into play because what we're learning is that pediatrics, children, respond to injuries and illnesses different than adults. And as such, they need specialty care. Stroke centers have come up in the last 20, 25 years. So if somebody's having a severe stroke, again, the closest hospital may not be the most appropriate hospital. Cardiac catheterization centers are something new in the field of EMS. So it's very likely that if you're having somebody having a major heart attack, that you may be directed by medical control to transport them and bypass the nearest hospital to go to a hospital that has a cardiac catheterization center. Most communities have a 911 system, but some communities still have a need to call a 7-digit number to get an emergency response. But the emergency department hospital personnel that you'll be interacting with are not just physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals, but also PAs, therapists, NPs, other clinical support, MAs, medical assistants, and just to name a few. You'll also be working with local law enforcement, state, federal, and local. I've had to interact with FBI in my time working in the South Bronx when new drugs were introduced into the area, and the DEA. The chain of human resources that make up the EMS system include, first, there's the patient with either a real or perceived injury or illness. So somebody makes that call to 911. That 911 call goes to the communication center where it's either received by a dispatcher or a call receiving operator, then routed to a dispatcher, which takes that information and assigns hopefully the nearest appropriate unit, whether it be first responders or EMTs. The EMTs come on the scene, they evaluate, they handle the situation, and then they transport that patient to the nearest appropriate facility where they're introduced into the allied health staff, where they'll receive definitive care, surgery, therapy, social services, whatever is needed. Thing I don't like about this slide, it really does not do justification for what happens between the dispatch center and the on-scene time and then transport. Because what happens when those EMTs are on the scene interacting with those patients is very, very intense. And that's the subject of most of what learning this semester. So let's stop for a moment and talk about the different levels of EMS training. As I mentioned before, we want to talk about the difference between EMT and paramedic, but the most basic fundamental level of EMS training is called the emergency medical responder, or what used to be known as the first responder. And emergency medical responders are usually other professionals like firefighters or lifeguards or maybe park rangers that have training in advanced first aid. They can do some things like CPR, wound care, bleeding control, defibrillation. In and of themselves, though, they don't individually staff and transport on ambulances by themselves. The minimum level of certification to respond and transport as well as treat your patient is the emergency medical technician, formerly known as the emergency EMT basic. And that's the level of training that you're receiving in this course right here at EMT basic. You'll see some references and you see some literature still referring to EMT/B. That's kind of an outdated nomenclature now. If right now it's usually just emergency medical technician. Then there's an advanced EMT, formerly known as EMT intermediate, that teaches some skills above and beyond what you learned at the basic level. Some more advanced skills like airway management, IV insertion, some medication administration. The 5 boroughs, New York City does not recognize that level of certification. You will see it out in Nassau and Suffolk and upstate and other places, but New York City hasn't gone there yet. And then ultimately, you have the highest level of pre-hospital care provider, which is the paramedic. If you like being an EMT, you will love being a paramedic. It really just lets you take the ball and run with it. Paramedics are trained to do a number of different things. They pretty much bring the emergency room to the scene of the emergency. If a cardiac situation, if the paramedics in the field cannot resuscitate and bring that person back to life, there's pretty much nothing they're going to be able to do in the emergency room above and beyond what can be done in the field by the paramedics. And if anybody's interested in going to paramedic at some point in time, we'll talk about it later on in the course, one thing at a time. Where would you go to get advanced trainings that offered in New York? Oh, there's many different places. So if you go to work for the city fire department, EMS, you could be qualified. You may qualify to get into the paramedic training program. Basically, that's what I did. But before Fidney took over EMS, I had a few years in the city EMS. I took a screening exam, an interview, and then I qualified to get into the release program, where I was taken off the streets, put in the academy for 9 months, given paramedic training, became a certified paramedic, and in return, I had to agree to sign a contract to work for the city for at least 3 years to pay off my loan. Not a bad deal. There's other training institutions as well. Your instructor, Kevin Rummel, on Saturdays teaches at Northwell Training Institute. He runs a paramedic program there. There's other programs at St. John's and Stony Brook, just to name a few off the top of my head. So there's quite a few places, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on this semester. Right now, let's have a little bit of an understanding of what the roles and responsibilities of the EMTB, seeing how dated that is, are today. Well, first and foremost, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Now, a lot of people learn CPR, but EMTs need to know their CPR perfectly, absolutely perfectly. There's not one more fundamental skill that you have to be a master of, because I'll tell you, when it comes to CPR, you're not going to be doing it in a controlled environment in a classroom or even an emergency room or a hospital floor. You're going to be doing CPR in somebody's kitchen, in somebody's basement, in maybe a crack house, in maybe an airplane or a bus terminal, all sorts of different places. And if you, it could be one person watching over you, or it could be a crowd of people watching over you. The last cardiac arrest I did a couple of years back was in the Burger King over on Queens Boulevard in Elmhurst on a Saturday afternoon with about 40 people watching us. And the cell phones were likely out, probably on somebody's YouTube feed. That's not the time to not know what you're doing. Brianna, an ambulette is just something that is just a vehicle that transports patients to doctor's appointments, and it facilitates wheelchair. It doesn't offer any type of medical intervention. Defibrillation, I'm sure you're familiar with, when you shock the heart back into rhythm once it started. We'll talk about the whole physiology of how that works when we talk about cardiac emergencies. Extrication, proper removal of individuals from motor vehicles or tight spaces, and learning how to do that without aggravating spinal injuries or other injuries as well. Vital sign taking, learning how to take pulse, what readings mean, blood pressure. Medication administration, and it seems each year EMTs are becoming more and more responsible for medications. Back in when I first learned EMT, I think we learned about 3 medications. Now EMT basics learning up to either 12 to 15 different type of medications, and it's growing. Bleeding and hemorrhage control, treatment of musculoskeletal injuries and splinting. Very important is learning how to document and log what's happened in the call, and we'll talk about why that's so important when we have that lesson. You don't see this as much these days, but in some areas, we're still immobilizing patients involved in motor vehicle accidents or other traumatic injuries to protect their spine, especially their neck, to prevent paralysis. Some of the more happier occasions of EMS is assisting in delivery of newborn babies in the field. I myself have probably assisted in about 12 to 13 deliveries in my career. Never, seems like it might be scary at first, but never really was a problem. Many different medications well, we don't deliver unless we have the body parts to do it. We assist in delivery, I like to say, because, yeah, I don't tell my wife, when she was in multiple hours of labor that I ever delivered a baby. It'll get me slapped across the head. It's kind of funny, though, because he never really bothered me. I helped deliver him. Oh, that was really cool, Nathan. Yeah, right? So it's a whole different experience when it's on your own. I mean, I didn't think that anything could face me after so many years in EMS. And when my first child was born, I'm the one that almost staggered back and hit my head on the wall. But that could have been sleep deprivation also. But anyway, are you guys still with me? All right. Just in case you're ever preparing for a zombie apocalypse or anything like that. Okay, good. Okay, so what are some of the professional attributes or qualities that define a good EMT? Well, first off, you need to keep yourself in shape. You don't need to be an Olympic athlete to do this job. You don't need to be a power lifter, but you need to be in reasonable shape. You need to exercise. You need to have some level of strength. You're going to be going up and down flights of stairs. You're going to be carrying down people that weigh maybe 3 times more than you. And sometimes the worst stress on your body doesn't come from the hour-long CPR or the 13-story walk-up. Sometimes it comes just from sitting in the front of the ambulance for a prolonged period of time and letting your joints stiffen up. Don't get into that habit. An EMT needs to be non-judgmental and be empathetic. Excuse me, when they're on the scene of a call. I mean, yeah, if you'd taken better care of yourself, this wouldn't be happening. Well, look at the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah, if you have asthma, that can be a little more challenging, especially if you have exertional induced asthma. That's just something you should speak to your physician about. The guy's clutching his chest. He's probably seen his life flash before his eyes. And I've seen this too. I've brought patients in who were drowning in their own lung fluid because their hearts were given out. Yes, smelling of smoke and then being preached to by the triage nurse. Well, what do you expect? That's not the time to do that. You need to be the patient advocate. You need to assess, treat, not lecture. You need to be prepared for anything that comes your way. A good EMT, well, this one seems maybe a little overvigilant, will always overtreat than undertreat. Will take the right route rather than just the expedient route. You need to know what your role is in the field. You are a medical provider, a medical professional. You are not law enforcement. Some EMTs go out there and they think because they ride a truck with lights and sirens and because they got some tin badge they spent $3 in an Army-Navy store for, that they're an authority figure, and they let that authority go to their heads. I don't know what the hell this guy's doing with handcuffs and pepper spray. If you're in a situation where you think you need that, you're not in the right field. How do we backboard that? So one of the qualities of your best EMTs is the ability to adapt and overcome, improvise. 220 hours of education is nowhere near enough to prepare you for every single scenario you're going to encounter when you're out in the field. There's always going to be something that's not mentioned in the textbook. There's always going to be something that nobody's ever seen before. And you have to be able to take the foundation of what you've learned and make it work one way or the other. And that's what good EMTs do. The best EMTs are the ones that teach, that come back and share the knowledge they've learned through their training and through their experience. And that's why we like to encourage some of our best students to come back and teach for us at Queensborough. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. You need to have a good rudimentary knowledge of anatomy and physiology, not necessarily to the point of college level nursing degree or physician assistant degree, but just the basics to understand and have a good understanding of the physiology and pathophysiology of injuries and illnesses. So this was on some of you guys' minds. Where can you work as an EMT? As I mentioned before, there are a number of different venues. For one thing, a lot of EMTs go and work for the city 911 system. Now, say what you will about civil service and probably the low pay and working conditions that city EMTs have been in the papers for. The bottom line is that with 6 months of training, to work in a civil service position where you may have a relatively low base salary, that doesn't include, I think starting salary for EMTs is about 33 to 35,000 a year, maybe a little bit more. Not much, but that doesn't include overtime. That doesn't include differential pay for working over hours, like over midnight, which is 10% more. That doesn't include stipends for meal money. That also doesn't include the very good civil service benefits that you get working for the city. Medical, dental, pension. You work for the city for 25 years, you're eligible for retirement. Means even before your 50th birthday, you could be sitting on the beach sipping mimosas. Medical insurance. Medical insurance. Can't tout how important that is. My full-time job, I'm on my wife's medical plan. If I were to get medical for our family from my job, working for the Go Health system, I'd be paying about $1,200 a month for family coverage. $1,200, excuse me, $1,200 a month. Multiply that by 12, that's a good chunk of change out of my pocket each year. Luckily, I'm on my wife's plan who works for the city, and she pays nothing. So it's dental as well. A lot of places that you work for don't even offer dental coverage, just to name a few. So definitely something to consider, and not to mention the opportunity for advancement, for training to be paramedic, to go into other lateral fields like communications or operations, for advancement as an officer to lieutenant, captain, things of that sort. So just something to consider. Then you have your private voluntary hospitals, such as like the Northwell system, the Winthrop system, the NYU system, that all have their own ambulances, and they have some contract with other healthcare facilities, but a lot of them also have contracts with the city to put ambulances into the 911 system. And what's good about these systems is that sometimes you can work full-time or part-time or per diem on call, and the pay is different in place you work, some good, some bad, but there's a little more flexibility. It takes a little more time to get into these systems, but you never know. Then you have your private commercial ambulance companies. These are companies like Senior Care or Hunter and in Richmond County that are contracted by medical facilities like nursing homes or hospitals to provide medical transportation. Not the most exciting field, but still a necessary medical intervention. You got somebody in a hospital who needs services at another hospital. What do you got to do? You can't just throw them in a cab and wish them the best of luck. You have to have some type of medical supervised transport facilitating that transfer. That's private hospitals come. They don't pay a lot. Their benefits are not great, but it's a good stepping stone. You can do freelance work. I used to do work for the YMCA's, standing by on gymnastics meets and karate tournaments, martial arts tournaments, just basically being there in case somebody needed help and got a nice little chunk of change. And also, don't blow off the thought of volunteering. Volunteer experience always looks good on the resume. It's always going to put you above someone else, with all else being equal. There's always yes, Marilyn?
But with volunteering, you still need your certification, right?
I'm sorry, you came out a little garbled.
I said, with the volunteering, you still need your certification.
Not necessarily. Some volunteer agencies will bring you on board and they'll offer you training as a responder, as a either an extra set of hands. They'll have you train in dispatch or doing some ancillary work in the site. And then once you get certification, you'll be the one in charge on the ambulance. So it's definitely worth looking into, by all means. Some places may even reimburse you for paramedic training as well. Over by me, Wantagh Levittown Volunteer Ambulance Corps, if you're a member there in good standing and you go to paramedic school, they'll reimburse you the cost of paramedic school as long as you stay in a member with them over the course of 3 years in installments. So. Just a list of some ambulance, and some of these may not be in service anymore, but no, definitely worth checking out. So. And then upon completion of your basic course here at Queensborough or any state course, you can qualify to take the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians exam. And upon passing that, a lot of states offer what's called reciprocity, the recognition of your certification, rather than if you were going to move to a different state like Wyoming or something and having to start all over again, or starting to have to take the whole certification exam all over again. A lot of states will already recognize this. And if you're interested in doing that, just contact Daniel at the end of your course. So a couple little subjects just to touch up on is every EMS system should be involved in a process called quality improvement, which textbook says is a continuous self-review to identify aspects of the system that requires improvement. Basically, what quality improvement means is that after each and every call, we should always be asking ourselves, what could we have done better? Doesn't necessarily mean you did anything bad, but in medicine, just like in most other professions, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. Same thing with education. A good professor or teacher should always be asking themselves, how could I have made that presentation a little bit better? What could I have done to get through to that student a little bit easier? And also, if a problem is identified, a plan is developed and implemented to prevent further occurrences of the same problem. So maybe somebody had a hard time with taking a patient down on the stair chair. They stumbled their feet a little bit, so maybe they need a little extra training. Maybe equipment didn't work right on the scene of a call, so maybe they needed to implement a process where 2 people check the equipment before going out on the unit. Just simple examples like that. The role of the EMT in quality improvement includes careful documentation. Each and every patient encounter requires meticulous documentation. We'll go over that when the time is right. Becoming involved in the quality improvement process, maybe joining the committee, getting involved in education, obtain feedback from the hospital staff. Don't be afraid to, when you bring a patient to the hospital and they have conditions or medications that you've never heard of before, ask about it. You know, pick the physician's or the nurse's brain. Get to know them well. Maintain your equipment. I don't think anybody would recognize the saying, the Lone Ranger without a horse, but an EMT without functional equipment is mostly useless. You can't be of any use to your patient if the oxygen is empty in your tanks, or if the batteries in your defibrillator are uncharged, or if you ran out of trauma dressings and you can't control that bleed. Make sure you maintain that equipment to the best of your ability. Once you complete this course, you've only completed a fraction of your education. In any field of medicine, it's always important to constantly learn and keep learning and involve in what's called continuing education, going to courses and classes above and beyond what you've learned in school. Because as I said, medicine is constantly changing, constantly evolving. What was true 5 years ago is not necessarily true today, and vice versa. We're doing things today at the EMT basic level that were never heard of 10 years ago. Applying EKGs and transmitting them to telemetry, administering CPAP machines in the field at the basic level, giving intramuscular injections of medications. Never even thought about that 10 years ago. And yet, this is where we're evolving to. Maintaining your skills through constant retraining and refresher programs. Research is an important component of EMS as well. It used to be the days when all of our training, all of our guidelines, and all of our materials was given to us by physicians and medical staff. The field has evolved so much that a lot of the guidelines, a lot of the publications, a lot of the literature that makes up the EMS curriculum is being published by EMTs themselves with a little bit of educational experience. It's also important that what we do is based on evidence and not based on conjecture. For the longest time, we would do things in EMS based on what seemed like a good idea, but never really had any basis in evidence. For example, putting people in car accidents on long backboards because we thought it would protect their spine. Seemed like a good idea. There was never any evidence to prove that it reduced spinal injuries. And then after quite a bit of review, we found out that putting people on flat backboards for a prolonged period of time could actually be more detrimental, could actually aggravate injuries more than help them. So these are the things we learn over time, that we have to do things based on what's been proven to work and not just what seems like a good idea. EMT, I think today more than ever, is playing a big prominent role in public health. Just take, for example, the vaccination, the COVID vaccination push. A lot of these community centers that are offering vaccinations usually have EMTs and paramedics on standby just in case there's any type of untoward reaction to the vaccinations. Some places are actually even hiring paramedics themselves to administer the vaccinations under medical supervision. These are just a few examples of how EMS is getting involved in public health, blood pressure screenings, educational seminars about how to administer life-saving diabetic medications, just a few, for example. And just to know that every EMS system is overseen by a physician known as the medical director. The medical director pretty much extends their license to the EMT or the paramedic. So if you're working on an ambulance, if you're giving somebody CPR, if you're assisting somebody with aspirin, having chest pains, you're performing medical interventions. And to do that, you're basically assisting the medical director in charge with doing that. Medical director may be nowhere near the scene of the incident, but you're working as an extension under their license. So they delegate some of their authority to you. And they do that in one of two ways, either online or offline. Online means you have direct communication with that physician, either by telephone or radio. You're presenting that patient, you're presenting that assessment to them, and you're asking them permission or advice on how to proceed. Offline means there's no direct communication with that physician. Everything you do, whether it's administering aspirin for a chest pain or albuterol for an asthma or whatever, is done under what's called standing orders or offline. It's basically under protocol, a step-by-step list of things that you're supposed to do without any verbal interventions from that medical director. So any questions about anything we've covered so far? I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and hopefully some of them will be answered within the next few weeks or months. Any questions, comments, snide remarks? Bad jokes? Good jokes? Dirty jokes? Okay, so I'm going to, before we break out, I'm just going to dismiss from this venue for a moment, and I want to go back to the application. EMTs are allowed to administer certain medications, absolutely. We'll learn about that in a few weeks.